the class that I taught was about channeling. And as I was talking about how you channel, it seems like it's a difficult thing to try and teach or inspire, because so many people are sure they can't do it, and they come in with a kind of a preconceived idea, but they want to do it, but they don't know that they can. And channeling is a lot about just letting go and letting it happen. And as I was doing the class, all of a sudden I realized all the different things and different beings that I had channeled. And every time I channel somebody or something, it makes me more complete, because I'm channeling beings that sometimes are from this planet, sometimes they're not. And every time there's an energy that I grasp and go, wow. I think my life is a little bit difficult until I channel somebody who really had a difficult life. And it's very interesting. One of the ones that I was so amazed by it, and I'm going to read it, and if anybody wants a copy of this afterwards, I've got a few. I was invited to go to a hotel, the Holbrook Hotel, it's a Holbrook Inn, in Grass Valley, and it was rumored that that place is haunted. And so I thought, well, this is going to be fun, and so I walked in to the hotel and to check in, because a friend of mine was getting married, and I was helping with the wedding. And so there's all of this frivolity going on. And I walk in, and behind the registration desk is this very Irish-looking guy, small man, with a black and green checked hat. Only he's not of this world right now. He's an apparition. And as I looked at him, and he looked around, and he caught my eye, and he winked. And I went, wow. Because this was a bachelor party right now before the wedding. The wedding was going to be the next day. So there was a lot of alcohol, there was a lot of music, there were all of these. It was such a delightful time, because my friend John had just returned from Iran. And he and all of his buddies, the helicopter pilots, were there to be welcoming him and his bride to be Savita. So, and he was marrying his true love, which was so wonderful. I moved gradually through excited party guests to the wooden antique registration desk. The check-in process moved slowly and gave me time to study the colorful spirit behind the assistant manager. The short man with ginger-colored hair and mutton chops smiled broadly at the merriment. His blue eyes twinkled with the glint of too much booze, and his ethereal body swayed to music of the Dixie Chicks. He seemed delighted that I could see him and gave me a wink and a touch of his green and black checkered cloth hat. I smiled and gave him a slight wave. I was given the key to the Mark Twain room, number 2, and hauled luggage up the long winding staircase. I stopped often to stare at spirits standing around in their best clothes. Each man wore some kind of headgear. There were top hats, cowboy hats, fedoras, and derbies. Men graciously removed their hats to let me pass, a very gentlemanly procession of ghosts. They were illuminated by the dim lighting of the old chandeliers against the striped green and ivory wallpaper. I opened the door with a large skeleton key, and the room seemed to spring to life. The grand picture of Mark Twain and his bushy mustache glowed. I walked in and sat on the large feather bed with a shiny brass headboard and white crocheted coverlet. Loud laughter drew my attention to the long sweeping veranda across the front of the hotel. I opened the door and stepped into a vision of an Old West movie. Below I could see muddy streets and the soft glow of gas lights, and I heard clomping horses pulling carriages and lots of yelling. Everything was diffused and fuzzy, but I could still make out hat-covered heads peering upward in the early evening coolness. There were 3 kimono-clad women in various states of makeup and dress leaning over the banister and calling to men below. A thin young woman sat on a rattan stool in a corner of the balcony. She wore a threadbare green dress, and her mousy brown hair was pulled back into a bun. She clutched a small gray handkerchief. Her pale face looked empty, like she had been crying or was ill. She often brought the dirty cloth up to her face and covered her mouth as she coughed. Her watery blue eyes followed me when I smiled at her. I went back into the room and excitedly told Corky, "This place is full of gold rush dead people." In my work as a psychic, I've seen ghosts all over the world, but never so many in such a short period of time. We headed down the stairs for dinner, and I was stopped by a vision. He wore a long black frock coat, a white shirt, black gambler string tie, and was holding a soft black fedora. He had a large black mustache and black bushy eyebrows. The name Black Bart leaped into my consciousness, to be met with a slight sneer by the apparition, and the name George Thomas settled into my head. Even without an ace of spades protruding from his pocket, you could tell George was a gambler. This being was so substantial that I crossed the stairs to avoid him. I had once ambled through a spirit at the James Lick Mansion and was cold for 3 days. Unfortunately, my friend Gail did not follow my lead and walked straight through George. She shuddered with cold all night. I peered into the saloon and saw joyful spirits floating in midair. They gave the bar a touch of Disney's Haunted Mansion. Plump dance girls, dusty cowboys, miners, gamblers, and a couple of preachers drifted across the ceiling. After dinner in the middle of the night, I was awakened by the young girl in the faded green dress. "Please, missus, I know you can hear me. Can you help Mary Beth find her ring?" I sat up and stared at Mary Beth. She looked even more pathetic. Her arms were skinny and white, and her face was feverishly flushed. She reached long, bony fingers of her right hand towards me. I said, "Mary Beth, your ring can't be in this room. It has been cleaned thousands of times since you died." She put her face in her hands and cried, "I ain't dead. I can see you, missus, and I see the ladies and everything. I have to get the ring before Charlie comes back." She hurried across the room and floated through the wall. Around 4 a.m., I was again awakened by Mary Beth. She demanded I help her find her wedding ring. I dragged out of bed and we looked through a few cabinets. I told her I needed to get back to sleep. She cried and talked about how hard her husband had prospected to buy her ring. When she returned at 6 a.m., I was a bit testy. "Mary Beth," I said, "go away. After the wedding, my friends and I will come back here and find your ring." When I awoke, I was delighted to see sun streaming through the windows of the room. Mary Beth's dusty smell was gone, and the room was warm and cheery. I walked to the veranda and looked out. Toyotas, Hondas, and Beamers were parked on the street. Neon signs lit antique stores, and folks were walking briskly with Starbucks coffee in their hands. Maybe it had all been a bad dream. I turned on the water in the shower and was shocked to hear Mary Beth's slight lisp as she said, "It was hard for ladies to clean when you had to haul water up them stairs." "Missus, my folks were killed when their wagon overturned. The ladies took me in. I have toted meals, pressed dresses, and hauled water since I were a young'un. In all my 17 years, my husband being the only person ever loving me, I need you to find my ring." After the wedding, we prepared for a releasement of Mary Beth's spirit. Both Corky and Gail do ghost busting and were excited about being part of a real Old West seance. I pulled an antique square table across to the foot of the brass bed. I lit a small white candle. We held hands and said a prayer. The candle flame started to flicker violently, and then Mary Beth appeared. I told her she needed to let go of her earthly energies and move into spirit to follow the white light. Gail told her she would meet her husband, that he was lovingly ready to receive her. I envisioned a young man beside a Sierra stream. I could see ghost bumps on his scrawny bare arms. He was a kid of about 19, was intently plunging a gold pan into the icy water. I saw him slip and fall. By the odd angle of his leg and the stream coloring with his blood, I knew his leg was shattered. Miners came over, helped him out of the water, and placed him on the ground. A stained rag was pulled tightly around his leg, and everyone went back to prospering. One of the men said he would take Charlie back to camp before it got dark, but couldn't get to town for a few weeks. "Mary Beth," I told her, "Charlie had a broken leg. That's why he didn't come back. He had gold in his poke, and he was so sad when he got here and you were gone." "Where'd I go?" "Mary Beth, you died and were buried before he returned. Charlie is in spirit, Mary Beth, and waiting for you." The candle sputtered and then came back bright and furious. Mary Beth's energy became agitated, and then she was gone. We sat there holding hands, moved by Mary Beth's gentle energies. The sadness of separation from Charlie and the loss of her wedding ring. Each of us visualized her laughing and running with her young man. Then Gail said, "Look at the beautiful heart." Reflected on the bedroom wall was an outline of a Valentine heart. It was miraculously made by the shadow of my black fedora sitting on the brass bedpost. We knew it was a sign that Mary Beth had gone to her Charlie.
Aww.
And love is truly forever. That one of those that you go, oh, Mary Beth, you know, but it took me back. I'd always been fascinated by the Old West, but to actually see it and be a part of it. And that's when I talk about channeling and how absolutely wonderful it is for people and to do something. Because that story, all the people that had lost things during that weekend, people come down and say, my socks are gone. I had black socks for the wedding, and they're missing. Gail went back to put her jewelry on, and it was gone. And it was all found before we left. But it was like the minute we left the room, things changed. There was the maid that I talked to that was going to clean our room. She said, oh yeah, every time we come in the room, the TV's on. We shut it off and leave, then we come back and the TV's on. She said, whatever spirits are here are really catching up by watching TV. And as we were checking out the next day after the wedding, a man was introduced to me, and he was a ghost hunter from England. This man traveled all the way to meet some ghosts and said he was pretty disappointed. He had only felt some spirits but didn't actually see any. I had a distinct impression that the short Irish gentleman behind the registration desk wasn't interested in talking to any Brit and had probably alerted his pals. And that was one of the most exciting ones that I had, except when I was on the, I've mentioned this one before, when I made the mistake of going on the USS Arizona in Pearl Harbor. Because that one was, I got there, I forget that I'm a channel. For some reason, I don't realize that I'm a psychic when I go to these places until I get embroiled in something and I can't get out of it. But I was in Honolulu, and my husband said, let's go look at the, Pearl Harbor and go look at the USS Arizona. And I said, oh, sure. Sounds like something you do on vacation. So we got there, and we took the little jitney out to the memorial. And the minute I got into that little jitney, little tiny boat, really, it started rocking, and I started getting nauseous. And I went, I don't know if I like this, but it'll be fine when I get there. Well, it wasn't. I got to the memorial, and all of that started. I was like in a vortex, and I had to sit down. And my husband said, wow, look at, they've got a list of all the names of all the men. And there were over 2,000 names. Yeah. And I was sitting there, like my head was down, and all of a sudden I heard voices. And men were giving me their name, rank, and serial number. And it dawned on me they were still there. Their spirits were still there. And so I started giving him the names, and he was checking them off on the wall, which is a very interesting thing to have happening. And we did this for about 10 names, and it kept getting more and more overwhelming. And there's one man, he said, please, see if you can find my name. No, not my name, see if you can find my brother. And I thought, okay, I'll see. And I looked, and his brother had died too. And later when I got home, I read up about how many brothers were on the USS Arizona. And there were 20 sets and one set of triplets. Yeah. And that's why, if you've ever seen Saving Private Ryan, you realize that came up after that. And I was so sitting there on that memorial, listening to these men, how young they were. You could tell in their voice. And one that I will never forget, he said, my name's Moses. And I said, Moses, how are you? He said, oh, I'm doing pretty good, but I don't think my mama knows where I am. I'm the cook. And I said, okay. And I said, why don't you leave? Why don't you find the white light and go? And he said, not light, not light. Well, they died in an explosion. Right. And so what happened is when they saw a light, that's the first thing they would recoil from. So I very gently said, Moses, could you start telling people to ask for an angel to come take them? And he said, I can. And so that's one of those things that, the other thing that made me cry in some of these is because Moses was leading him into the promised land.
Oh my God.
Because you could just hear this whoosh, whoosh, whoosh as the angels came and started taking them. So if you ever go back to the memorial, make sure you don't tell them to go to the light if you feel any spirits. But people have said it, they never feel it. It was a very positive thing. They couldn't feel those spirits. course, that was way back in 1975 that I did that. But this channeling and talking to people all over the world, and now one other one that I'm not just giving you the really sensational ones, it seems, but ones that really touched my heart. We were in Glastonbury, and we were at the Glastonbury Abbey. And Glastonbury Abbey, I think, was built in 822. I mean, it's very, very old.
Very old. It's like 5 something.
Yeah, and the Georgia Pilgrim was built in 8 something. Yeah, and so I mean, there's just these old places. So we were there, and we're walking through the Abbey, and all of a sudden I hear a, and I looked, and there's a young boy, and it's an apparition, and he's about 11. And I said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, I'm miserable. And I said, "Why don't you go into spirit?" He said, "I can't." I said, "Why can't you?" "Because I'm going to hell." I said, "Who told you you were going to hell?" And he said, "The priest." And I said, "Why did the priest tell you I'm standing here," and Corky knows when I stand there and kind of go, that I'm communicating, Everybody else on the trip knew Donnie's into that mode. And he said, "Because I'm a bastard." And I said, "And what does that mean?" He said, "My mama wasn't married when I was born, and it says in the Bible I can't go to heaven." And I said, "How long ago was that?" And he said, "I've been here nearly as long as the Abbey." And I said, "What's your name?" And he said, "Kevin." And I said, "Okay, Kevin, why don't you come with me?" He said, "Okay." He said, "Where are we going?" I said, "I'm going to take you into the light." And he said, "How do we do that?" And I'm thinking, I don't really know. But I made a promise. And so he and I'm walking along with Kevin. And I go up to the room, and the Georgian Pilgrim had 2 stories, and we were in the 2nd floor. And I walk in the room with Kevin, Corky straightly behind, going, "Now what are we doing?" And on the drapes is a red, white, and blue butterfly. I've never seen a red, white, and blue butterfly. A real butterfly. And this real butterfly is dying. You could just see its little wings, and it was just clutching. And I went, no butterfly should die in the 2nd story of a hotel. And so I very gently picked it up and put it in a little tissue, and I walked out and I said, "Come on, Kevin, this butterfly is going to take you to heaven." Aww. And he said, "The butterfly?" I said, "Come on, follow it." He said, "I love butterflies." And so we went walking out, Corky's behind me, like, "What are we doing?" "We're taking the butterfly out, and it's going to take Kevin to heaven." And he said, she goes, "Okay." And so we go out, and I put it on one of the twigs of a tree, and it just stopped, and all of a sudden I hear Kevin go, and he was gone. Wow. And so that whole thing of helping, I've talked to spirits in Sedona many times, a lot of different spirits. The one that I'm excited about, because you can experience this maybe too, was when we were in Mount Shasta, one of our trips. We had traveled up in a great big bus, and when we got there, right before we got there, I said, "What's your astrological sign?" And everybody was putting up their hands with what they were, and we started out with, well, we just absolutely didn't have any, there were Aquarian. I thought, that is so weird with 50 people. No, she wasn't on that trip. No Aquarians. That's because usually it kind of balances out, with different signs. And so I had that in the back of my head. To be balanced, we need some Aquarians here, Or all those Virgos are going to just take over. And so,
there are a lot of us.
A lot of us on these trips. And so we went dancing. We were Sufi dancing at a wonderful hall near the headwaters of the Sacramento River. And our guide, Missy Gillespie, had been talking about, there's Lemurians around. Somebody saw some a couple of months ago, and they came into town wearing these white robes, and they had gold, and they bought some groceries. And I thought, well, that's interesting, a Lemurian, you know. So we're dancing, we're doing Sufi dancing, and if you haven't done Sufi dancing, it's wonderful. We were in a circle doing this, and two people appeared. And they were both about 6'2", a man and a woman, all dressed in white. And I walked up and said, "Hi, what sign are you?" And they said, "Aquarius." And they looked like maybe brother and sister, and they joined us for a dance. And then they started leaving, and I said, "Oh, wait, don't go." And they said, "We have to." And they walked out, and Missy came, and we both looked, and they were gone.
We all walked to the door, and they were gone.
And they were gone. She said, "Welcome to meeting your first Lemurians." And so they were deceased, but they were certainly from a different realm. And if you haven't read about Lemuria, please do, because there are so many wonderful things that you can read. One of the ones that I want to bring to your attention, because you can go see her, in Half Moon Bay, where's the distillery? Half Moon Bay? Yeah.
Just north of
Moss Beach. Yeah, exactly, thank you. Moss Beach. I had gone there because a client had come in and said, "I need you to find out who murdered my father." I've got another murder story, don't I? So I said, "Okay, what happened?" And she said, "Well, he was killed because he was dealing drugs." And I said, "All right." She said, "But that's the weird thing is, where he lived, the FBI went there and punched holes in all the walls, trying to find money and drugs." She said, "The house has just been riddled with everything going on." And she says, "But in the backyard, money is appearing out of the ground. Dollar bills, $5 a bill, they just kind of were there. They're not there, we go out there, it's kind of muddy under this big tree, and there's another bill." And she said, "People are hearing about this, and they're starting to dig up the backyard." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "I can't do anything about my dad. He's gone. And he was really, really a bad person. He was in the import-export business, and he was difficult to live with, and he had been doing drugs and selling drugs, and he's gone, but I'm worried about the place that he left behind." So I said, "Okay." So I went around, went in the back yard, and all of a sudden I hear this ancient voice. She said, "Tell him to stop." All I'm looking at is a tree. And the voice says, "I'm afraid they're going to set fire if they keep doing all the demolition to the house. And they'll burn down my forest." And "Who are you?" She said, "I'm the guardian." I said, "How long have you been here?" And she said, "Longer than you know. And I'm taking care of the area." And I said, "Okay, so why is there money coming through the ground?" She said, "There's bags of money buried in between my roots. And every time it rains, I find a way to pull some of it out. I want people to find the money and leave." Oh. And I said, "Okay." I said, "What else are you guardian for?" She said, "I am a base for when people return from other planets. They know I'm here." And this is the second time I've encountered a guardian. And I said, "You mean you are known throughout the galaxy? Sounds like Star Wars." And she said, "It is. And yes, I'm known throughout the galaxy as the guardian of the forest." So if you ever go to Moss Beach, you will notice there's a grove of trees, and there just seems like no reason for them to be there. And it's a beacon for anybody coming in, whether they're ETs or whatever, right there. And I said to Corky, I said, as we're driving away, "Well, that was interesting." And I'm talking to a guardian, and she said, "Look." She was looking in the rearview mirror, and I turned around, and there's that big beacon that the government puts up that tracks that big round beacon. I don't know what they're called.
Searchlight?
No, it's a
Satellite dish?
Satellite dish.
Yes, yeah.
And it's going doo, 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 and I go, somebody else knows what's going on here. And then I talked to different people, and they said, yeah, it's really a place where people feel the energy of ETs. So we went back to behind the distillery, and there I took a group, and we went up behind there, and there's a circle. And I said, see if you can feel ET energy. And everybody went, yes, it feels different than anything I've ever felt. Yes,
We forgot to add Crystal.
oh, yeah.
And
That's another ET place where I went, and we noticed that. But all this being a channel, I've been to ghost towns that to me weren't ghost towns, they were just places where people had died. How many of you have heard of Doti, California? And I had heard of it being a ghost town. So I went ready to find ancient miners, you know, all of that good stuff like at Holbrook Inn. And I got there, and I for any of you who are intuitive, when you get someplace where the buildings are old, take your left hand and put it on a staircase and feel the energy. And as I felt the energy, I heard this woman crying, and all of a sudden I saw this woman who was dressed like in the 1930s, maybe 20s. That wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for something a lot older. And I said, what are you doing here? And she said, we have no place else to go. I said, why not? She said, it's the depression. So the depression sadness had overlaid the old mining energy, but they had moved into the buildings that had been built there by the miners. So if you ever go to Bodie, it's not that far away. It's down 395, I believe. Very interesting place. But you're going to have, if you're very intuitive, you're going to have mixed feelings because you're not quite getting what you thought you would in an old mining town like I did in Calico and places like that. The other thing is, as you do all of this, try not to take away anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
You mean spiritually?
No, I mean physically. People are constantly going to old places like ghost towns, old places where there's been any kind of negative energy, and they pick up things and take them home with them. And quite often you pick up something that has an energy about it. And it's kind of like picking up anything in Hawaii, lava or anything, and bringing it home. And then you'll feel all that energy and have to send it back. In Nectin Glen, we saw fairies. And that was really interesting. We have pictures of fairies in Nectin Glen. They had this beautiful pool of water, and most everybody stripped down to bra and panties or whatever and jumped in to join the fairies. It was the most exhilarating feeling to be there and to be able to see energies from a different realm. When I was in Hawaii, in Kauai, first time I went there, I saw these weird little hills and little valleys, and I said, what is that? And they said, that's a Menehune Trench. And I thought, oh, so I asked to talk to a Menehune. And they came and took my jewelry, and then they gave it back. I don't know what this is about spirits and moving jewelry, but it was...
They like chocolate.
Yeah, they like, and so I had read up on them, because this fascinated me, because I was taking a group there. And they said, Menehunes like beer and chocolate. And so I told all these wonderful people how you could talk to them, and they'll give you magical dreams. But you'll also drink all your beer and eat all your chocolate and move your jewelry. And that's what happened. So, Annie, what do you have to add to that?
Oh my gosh.
Come on, stand up.
You know, I just remember, you know, we were all talking about the Menehunes, and then anytime anything happened, we'd say it was the Menehunes, but we would leave chocolate out for them, and we would say to them before we would go to bed at night, you know, please, I really want to wear this necklace tomorrow. Could you please bring it back? And the chocolate would be gone, and the necklace would be back. So, you know, yeah, it was pretty amazing. It was, you know, we've had some pretty amazing journeys. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're about 4 feet tall, and very, very dark-skinned little beings that run around. And you were also in Glastonbury,
yes,
and went through me talking to Kevin, and so it's so nice because you never know what's going to happen when you're.
I was also there with the Lemurians.
The Lemurians,
yes,
yeah.
With the Lemurians, yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to leave you with one that was. I was in Tulum, Mexico, and we're walking along, and there's a bluff, and the ocean is down here. Beautiful, beautiful place. And it's near Cancun, and all of a sudden there was this person walking on the beach, a young man. And he looked up at me, and the next thing I knew, he was standing next to me. I had a feeling right then that it wasn't a sweat and blood type person. It was an apparition. And I said, hi, what are you doing here? He said, what are you doing here, and why can you see me? And I said, well, I tend to be able to see spirits. And I said, where did you come from? And he said, well, my home was way out there in the ocean. And where I lived, there was a big cataclysm. That's a great word for a spirit. And then there was an earthquake, and the whole place started crumbling. And my father and I got in our boat, and we were sailing away from there. And all of a sudden, a wave hit. And we landed on this shore. And I said, and then what happened? He said, you could see in the sky, is where I came from, was putting out so much dust and so much energy, the sky went black. And I said, what was the name of your home? And he said, Atlantis.
Wow.
And that was one of those where you go, okay, hello Tulum. And you talk to anybody from that area, and they'll say, Tulum is magical. And I'll say, yeah, it is. So thank you so much for listening to me share some of these things. I realize it's amazing the different places you can go. If you're going through the Panama Canal, protect yourself. Too many people died building that canal, and it's like very difficult. Stay away from places like Little Bighorn. I made the mistake of going there. Whew. Gettysburg. Whew. There are so many places where it's very, very difficult to be. And when you can listen to the spirits and you can listen to them talking, kind of watch yourself, protect yourself. And I had a poem. And this is something that, because I kind of started out with Pearl Harbor here, and it says, "'Twas the day before that fateful day, December 6th, I think they say, when leave trucks passed Pearl Harbor clear, the servicemen perched in the rear. No thought gave they of things to come, for them that day all work was done. In waters quiet of Pearl Harbor Bay, the ship serene at anchor lay. Nor did we give the slightest thought of treacherous deeds by the yellow lot. These men whose very acts of treason are done with neither rhyme nor reason, for if we knew what was in store, where nay would leave that day before, for fun and drink to forget the war of Britain, Europe, and Singapore. For all of us there was no fear, this time of peace and Christmas cheer. Forget the axiom might is right, guardians of peace, were we that right. We passed the sailors in cabs galore, those men in white who came ashore. But some will never be seen again, in carefree fun, these sailor men. The Sabbath day dawned bright and clear, a brand of fire ore, that lofty sphere of Diamond Head, Hawaii's own, a picture itself that can't be shown, unless observed with naked eye, that makes one look and stop and sigh. What more could lowly humans ask to start upon their daily task? The men asleep in barracks late knew no war that morn at 8. The plains on fields, their motors cold, like sheep asleep amongst the fold. The ships at anchor with turbines stilled, their crews below in hammocks filled, and faint as though it were a dream, a sound steals on upon the scene. A drone of many red-tipped things, the rising sun upon their wings. Those who saw would not believe, and those that heard could not conceive. A single shocking thundering roar, followed by another, and many more, to rob the sleep from weary eyes, or close forever those that died. A hot machine gun's chattering rattle mowed men down like herds of cattle. A bomb destroys an airplane hangar. The planes within will fly no more. Bombs explode upon a ship, bringing lasting men into the deep, to sink without the slightest thought of what brought on this hell they caught. What seemed like years, the horrible remains, blasting men and ships and planes, and just as quick as they had come, away they went, their foul deeds done, to leave the burning wreckage here, the scorching hulks of dead ships near, and blasted forms of dying men, alive in hell to die again. At night the skies were all but clear, the rosy glow of a white-hot bier showed on clouds the havoc wrought, and greedy flames the men still fought. But from the ruins arose this cry, that night from those who did not die. Beware, we'll take 11 for every death of December 7. And from that day there has arisen a cry for vengeance, and storms they've driven. This fateful day among the ages still stand out red in history's pages. Those men whom home folk held so dear will be avenged, have no fear, and their lives they gave in vain, pray too may not remain. And I went, how many of the people now have no idea what happened in Pearl Harbor? And this was written by Fremont Seward. And I went, wow. And he was there in Hawaii at the time. And so when you think about those that died, I was so glad that I had gone to Pearl Harbor and was able to release their spirits. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And now it's time to pass the basket. And here, you turn your program over and you can see what we talk about when we say, giving to the ministry,
from which we receive our spiritual support and nurturing, is an